Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Thursday, December 21st, 2017. Just 4 more days before Christmas. And 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, hoo-hoo. That's hoo-hoo for people who are feeling good about it. For people who are stressing out, well, they're the ones who need to call in or at least listen to the program today. but
get your daily dose of happiness.
Get your daily dose of happiness.
Go into the holidays
Absolutely.
Feeling encouraged and uplifted.
Because that's what keeps you going, no doubt about it. But it has been an amazing month of December so far. So I don't know about you, Wendy. I'm already getting my Christmas gifts. I'm getting it every single day. It just keeps me going in ways that I am still not yet able to fathom. Like I was telling you before the show, it just keeps building and building and building.
I'm with you on that. I mean, just being a part of this podcast has just really changed my world. It's changed mostly how it's changed my world. It's allowed me to experience something that others had told me wasn't possible. Because I wanted to be discovered for my talent and what I did and do something that was passionate, and you reached out and you discovered me through a website, and boom, here we are. And so to me, it's like now that's blown away what was not possible before, and now I know this is possible, and if it's possible once, for me, I know it's possible multiple times.
By the way, you remember last week we topped the 10,000 plays mark? We're almost to 11,000.
That's only been like that. The last 1,000's only been a couple days.
I know. It's
amazing.
Moving. It's moving. It's moving really great. Yep. Wow. So lots of reasons to be excited.
Well, and we're headed towards 1 million because that was the target we set for the end of 2018.
That's right.
I have a feeling that's going to be surpassed a whole lot earlier than next December.
I think you're right. I would not be surprised if we get there halfway through the year. That would actually tally with what I think is going to happen, and it's going to be one heck of a ride.
Exciting.
So we want listeners to come along on that ride too. That's going to be a fun ride. So just keep tuning in. Interesting thing that's been happening too. I was looking at the stats today. And one of the things I can track is not only how often, how many things get played, but I can also see not who it is, but I can see that, person from this IP address is playing it X number of times, so to speak. And when you add it all up, about 6 months ago, typically the average listener listened to maybe 4 episodes, something like that. That number is now up to 16.
Like one unique user has listened to 16 episodes?
Right. Which means people are becoming loyal listeners, which is just fantastic news.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow, indeed. So it kind of ties into what I came up with a topic today. This is actually a topic that doesn't really fit the Christmas season specifically, but there are some days, you know how it is. Some days you're saying, okay, so what should we talk about today? So I just have a list that Google puts together for me that is basically just a list of recently published articles around the world on topics related to positivity, law of attraction, happiness, joy, all that kind of stuff. And I'll filter through and see what's there. And I saw one that was about productivity. I said, okay, well, let's see what that's about. I clicked on it, and there was the TED Talk by Shawn Achor, which is one of my favorites of all time, and it's one I know you've seen too. And I thought, well, that's I don't really believe in omens, but there's kind of an omen. I like that one because that talk was so inspiring the first time plus it's so funny too, but it was so inspiring the first time I saw it that, if I'm seeing it again here, I figure, okay, this is the universe saying, go ahead, talk about productivity today or talk about something related to the talk. And the reason I picked productivity is because Shawn Achor, in his first book, The Happiness Advantage, a large portion of that book is devoted to how you use happiness and getting yourself into a happy state as a way to be more productive in your work life. In fact, he published that book just around the time of the crash of 2008. And as a result, he ended up getting a lot of gigs with some pretty high-powered companies, including some major banks. Some of the major banks that had really been teetering on the brink, and they had huge layoffs and all this kind of stuff. And so, as you might imagine, the work environments in some of those banks was pretty depressing. There were people who were losing bonuses, people were losing jobs. I mean, all kinds of stuff was going on. Morale was at an all-time low. And they brought him in to talk about happiness. And there's a number of really good stories that he tells about what happened when he was doing all that. But I won't try to repeat any of the stories. Well, I'll tell you one bit of one story. He goes into this one bank and he gives his presentation, and I can't remember what it was. He was giving an example of why it is that happiness is so important, and he always does it based on scientific evidence. Of course, he's a Harvard graduate, and he pursued this whole field as a scientist would. So he's not really so much a law of attraction person. He's more of a positive psychology person. And he's giving this example, and I think he asked the audience, has anyone ever done such and such? And he got a bunch of hands. And then he got this one guy who said, well, all of what you're talking about here makes sense, but isn't this all just common sense? I mean, isn't this just a waste of time because everybody already knows this? And he was like flabbergasted, didn't hardly even know what to say. But he struggled on, and he completed the presentation. And afterward, the guy who had brought him in, the vice president or whatever it was, came over to him, shook his hand, and said, I just wanted to congratulate you. And he says, congratulate me for what? He says, you know that guy who asked the question? I said, oh, yeah. I says, sure. And he says, I remember who that guy is. And the vice president says, that is the most pessimistic, cynical person who works in the department. He was the last person we thought would ever volunteer anything in a meeting like this.
Wow.
Which was not what Sean expected at all.
So the very fact that the guy stood up and actually participated is what made the vice president of the company so excited.
It blew his mind. He said this guy was so toxic that people didn't even want to work with him anymore. And here he was actually buying into what some positivity speaker was talking about.
That is so one of those situations where it's kind of like that flipped upside down. You had no idea what you would expect.
Absolutely. One of the fascinating things that comes out of that TED Talk and out of the book, too, is the connection that the research scientists have found between not only happiness and productivity, but between happiness and success in general. And there's a lot of statistics he throws around and so forth. And he actually does provide some information about the research that they did. Some of the research is fascinating, too. But the bottom line is that it turns out through the research that he has discovered and that he has done himself, the ability of success to prove, or not prove, to predict, let's put it that way, to predict happiness is very low. It can be as low as like 10%, maybe as high as 25% on a good day. Whereas if you reverse the formula, if you ask the question, what is the likelihood that a happier, optimistic person will be successful, the numbers shoot up to the 75 to 90% range.
And what was the first question?
So the first one is, what happens if you try to follow the formula that success leads to happiness? And the second one is, what happens if you follow the formula that happiness leads to success? So which one comes first, in other words? Does success come first, or does happiness come first? And those who try to put success first achieve happiness maybe 10, 12, 14, 15% of the time, maybe even as high as 25%, depending on the study. Those who try to put happiness first succeed 75 to 90% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's really...
Well, that's certainly... I mean, that lines up with what we know about law of attraction.
Oh, absolutely it does, yeah. But it goes against what is traditionally believed to be true by, say, your typical MBA who's managing a business unit. They believe that you want to set out a goal and then get people to meet the goal and then move the goalpost. And that's going to lead to happiness. And it's just diametrically the opposite.
So I think what I'm hearing is that if you set a goal because you're wanting to be successful, then when you arrive at success, then you get to experience happiness? That's
the traditional theory, right. And it's the theory that's proven to be wrong. In fact, it's almost always wrong.
And that it so perfectly coincides with what I've heard Abraham say numerous times. Because if they say, their phrase is, you can't get there from here. And what they're talking about is, if you're miserable and unhappy about something right now, you can't get to the joyful place of having achieved the manifestation you're looking for, the success or the dream house or the fabulous spouse or whatever it is you're wanting. You can't get to that from your place of being unhappy and miserable.
Right.
Or saying, where's my stuff? And what they've said over and over and over is, you have to find a way, and they leave the find a way part up to you, but you have to find a way to get into the space of feeling good as though you have it already, and then that thing that you don't yet have becomes the thing that gets created and manifested in your world.
Exactly. And this is what jazzes me so much about being a student, not only of the law of attraction, but also of positive psychology, to the limited extent I've been able to be a student, because I've never taken a course in it, but certainly there's literature out there. And it's truly fascinating how many parallels there are between the two of them. Just fascinating. And in ways that I think that either discipline is not terribly clear how good the other discipline is.
Well, I don't know why this is popping into my head, but I know that when I was probably early years of high school, for whatever reason, I love Barry Manilow. That's not a for whatever reason. I just love Barry Manilow. But I would put on, a Barry Manilow album, and let's say it's a Saturday afternoon, and I get to just kind of be in my own space doing my own thing in my bedroom with the door closed. And I'd put on Barry Manilow. Well, if you know Barry Manilow, you know most of his songs are kind of depressing.
Yeah, it is. True. It's funny.
The majority of the themes are, I want the girl, I can't get the girl, or I had the girl, and I've now lost the girl.
Pretty much, yeah. I think you just summarized his entire compilation.
Pretty much, which I think is really funny that that's who I did. I really loved his music, but what I found myself doing as I'm listening to his music, I'm laying on my bed, and I'm just letting it kind of, go right through me, resonate through me, and I would go into tears, and I would cry. And my tears were about thoughts that I had about my own lack of relationship and how I desperately wanted a boyfriend, and it wasn't happening, and I was so sad. So, of course, you could see how Barry Manilow's lyrics were perfectly mirroring, what I was feeling. But the truth was, I started with Barry Manilow, and then my thoughts went to how sad my miserable lack of love life was. Mm-hmm. And I would just cry and cry and cry for hours until my mother would say, would you please change the music? Put on something different, And I'm just thinking now, I know that somehow fits what we're talking about, but it's more the reverse. It's the anti-success. Mm-hmm. It's like my environment was kind of offering me something to think about, and it tapped into something that I wasn't very successful at, which was relationships, and it just made me sad and depressed.
It really shows that this whole thing works both directions. I think that's what you're saying.
Yep.
It works both directions. And not only does it work both directions, but for the most part, we grew up, and most people grow up, kind of living by default. That's my way of saying it. We live in the is. We are influenced by the is, and whatever's going on in the is governs the way we feel. And
because Barry Manilow's lyrics certainly was governing me.
Yep.
Because my intention of listening to the music was to relax and sing along with Barry Manilow, and I actually was thinking, this should be a happy thing, and yet it ended up turning into depression every time.
Yeah, which shows how powerful music is, by the way. But
yes, that too.
It leads to the thought, well, how many different ways do we poison ourselves with depressing or angry or frustrated or fearful or any other negative kind of programming? Because music is just one way we do it. We do it a lot of different ways. And it really... I don't want to spend too much time on that part because it's depressing, but it's like a reminder that it's very important for us, for those of us who want to make better lives for ourselves, who want to have happier lives, who want to have successful lives, who want to reach our goals, who want to attract the things we're trying to attract and so forth. It's really important for us to recognize this requires conscious effort. And effort is probably the wrong word. Conscious attention, I think, is probably the better word. It requires conscious attention to what we are choosing to focus on, because most of the options that are out there available to us are Barry Manilow. They are the ones that make us feel bad. They might be the news, they might be entertainment, they might be music, they could be almost any major field that we gain our contact from in society, so to speak. But they're overwhelmingly negative.
Well, and so a number of years ago, I worked at a broadcast radio station where they had 4 stations like under one company, and I worked primarily for the talk radio station. And what I thought was really cool, I was very enamored by the radio personalities that were actually in-house. I knew them. I got to meet them. You know, we passed each other in the hallway. But the fun thing is, now that I knew them, I wanted to listen to their shows and get to know them. And I learned to really love and adore them. And they both were talking about politics. One of them, I think, was a little bit more Republican, and the other one was a little bit more conservative in their approach. But, you know, I didn't really have a political point of view that was very strong at the time. And so I would listen to one on my drive into work and one on my drive home from work.
Okay.
And the more I listened to them, the more I found myself adopting their points of view. Because, you know, they did research for the topics they were talking about, and it seemed really plausible to me. Whatever each one was saying seemed like, well, that seems right.
Okay.
You know, which, side note, you know, you and I have talked about how you can make analytics say anything you want, left, right, upside down.
Oh, of course,
But
sure.
anyway, and side note. So back into my story, I'm listening to these guys every day, and I worked at the station for 2 years, and then the station got sold. And what I didn't know, because I'd never worked in radio before, is whenever a station sells, everybody gets fired and they start with a whole new staff. And they usually change all the programming. So I was one of the first people fired. But of course they tell me, you know, but you're entitled to come back anytime you want. There's no negative reason, but we have to let you go. So anyway, that's a whole other story. But what I realized is I had this real vacuum in my life where talk radio was, because they let go my 2 favorite personalities because they now changed the entire format of the station.
Sure.
And so I was now flipping the radio dial looking for another talk radio show that could kind of fill that vacuum in my life, because now I was hooked. And as I listened to different talk show hosts, I'm like, well, they're not the same as Daryl, or they're not the same as Greg. You know, that's who I'm really wanting to hear. And little by little, I just went, you know what, maybe I'm just going to let go of it, because I can't find anyone I love as much as the 2 that I really adored.
Okay.
But the very fascinating point in this, and this was like an unexpected result, was over time, as I was listening to less and less political talk radio, the more my happiness quotient was increasing.
What a shock.
Now, it's not like I didn't set out to, like, make this happen, but I did notice I was feeling better. The truth was, I didn't know I was feeling bad before, because it happened so in incremental stages. You know, because I didn't at first just adopt every belief Daryl and Greg had. I just listened, and over time I started to trust in what they said more and more and more. And kind of like, have you heard the analogy of the frog that jumps into lukewarm water, and that happens to be on the stove, and somebody turns on the stove heat, and little by little he doesn't realize it, but he ends up boiled to death.
Right, if you do it slowly.
Because the temperature of the water just changed ever so gently, and, you know, all of our bodies adjust and adapt. Well, unfortunately, by the time, you know, a frog realizes he's about to be boiled to death, he's already boiled to death. Well, the same thing happens in our life when it comes to the environments that we're around. If we're around an environment that's toxic, even if we don't know it's toxic, little by little we start to ingest or absorb either the toxicity or the thoughts or the words or the music or the lyrics or whatever it may be, until you get to a certain point you're like fully indoctrinated. But you may never have chosen to be indoctrinated. Like, I didn't choose to be indoctrinated by these radio personalities and their beliefs and their thoughts about politics. But I really did get indoctrinated.
Oh, sure.
And as I started walking away from talk radio, not only did I kind of get my own self back into, because I'd hear a political view and I go, do I really believe that? I'm like, well, Daryl believed that, but do I believe that? And I just started to recognize and have greater awareness that I had given over my thoughts on these political issues to these other people that I admired. I liked their personalities, and they were doing so much research. I thought, oh, they must be right.
Yeah.
But, I stopped listening, and I literally felt my entire being buoy towards more happiness in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I recognized that, I made a very conscious decision. No more news for me. No more talk radio and no more news.
Good
and
for
I
you.
went on a no news diet, and I haven't listened to the news on the radio or TV in years.
Good for you. That's really good.
And it's a whole lot nicer to stay in an environment that I'm selecting than it was to be almost being boiled like a frog.
Oh, yeah, by far. Now take this, because what you're saying here is perfect. That was a beautiful example that you gave, a story that really ties the whole concept together. So now let's take this and apply it to almost any work environment that you can imagine. Any listener can certainly apply it to their own work environment. And ask yourself, regarding the work environment, particularly if you're not like Wendy who gets to work at home, if you actually work in some office building or something like that, what is your work environment like from a positive or negative perspective? And then ask yourself, how productive are you? Is there a correlation? I think most people will instantly say, depending on what their work environment is, if it's a relatively difficult work environment, they will instantly say, of course it impacts my productivity. I'm trying to figure out how to get through the day half the time. And the smaller number of people who are living and working in a positive environment may not have noticed that the environment was contributing, but I guarantee they're the ones who are getting stuff done. They don't have long lists of things that they're trying to catch up on. They're getting high rave reviews from their bosses, all because that positive environment is feeding them. It's feeding them with the feeling that everything that they're doing is worthwhile. It's worth doing. It's going to actually produce good results. And when you have that kind of thing going on, your productivity is going to go through the roof.
So that makes me think of, talk about lack of productivity, my very, very, very first ever in the world job where I got paid for it, which I think was at like $2.35 an hour. It was just a thing. I was in high school, and it was just going to be on Saturdays to kind of help some company kind of get through, like they were really, backlogged. And it was just, they needed some part-time help to get them through this backlog till they could get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, yeah, how cool. And a bunch of my friends were all going to do it. So to me, this was like the perfect environment. I'm going to be there with my friends,
mm-hmm.
and we're going to go and we're all going to work on something together, was how I was thinking about it.
Right.
So I show up, and, they tell me, okay, stand here. Little did I know it was kind of like a production line.
Mm-hmm.
And literally for 8 hours on my first Saturday, I would take a screw that was with my left hand, and I put it into this knob and twist it into the knob until it was completely in the knob. Then I'd move the finished knob to a pile on my right.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of reminds me of the I Love Lucy chocolate scene.
Yes.
Except there was no chocolates to be eaten.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't on a literal assembly line. It was just a box of screws and knobs and a box of finished parts. So, I'm kind of like, oh, this is interesting, maybe for my first 15 minutes.
Yeah, right.
And then after, I'm noticing I'm getting kind of sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of boring. And so I kind of, start having a conversation with the person who I know, because I know him from school, to my right, and we're like chatting up just chatting, not real loud, just chatting a little, but we're both still doing our thing.
Right.
And then, I start talking to the person to my left, and I realize that as long as I'm chatting, I'm not bored and I'm not falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured that's an optimum environment for continuing to work.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing you know, some supervisor comes over and pretty much, slaps me on the hand, not physically, but just saying, be quiet, no talking.
Mm.
And I looked at him, and there was no music. It was just total silence with probably 40, 50 people in this room all doing the same kind of activity. And I looked at my friends to each side of me like, you're kidding. We have like a Gestapo here? We can't even talk? So, we did our best to like go on for however long it was in silence. And then it was like we couldn't handle it. And we started whispering to one another just to try to keep ourselves awake. And sure enough, Gestapo, supervisor person would come over and tell us, you can't do that. You have to be quiet. There's no talking here.
Crazy.
Now, how on earth I did this 2 more Saturdays, I don't know. I guess I really wanted the money. But after the 3rd week, there was still more work that I could have done. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot do this because this environment, in my mind, was so oppressive. The supervisor, I felt, was being so cruel. I'm sure the supervisor was just doing her job. But the way she I felt very attacked. And, me being the A student that I have been, I was always admonished for doing good work. And so being in trouble didn't fit my MO. I don't go to detention. I don't get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I'm at this place and I'm getting in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, by having conversation, that was how I was improving productivity.
And I'm sure you were.
But it wasn't the way they wanted, they meaning the company. They didn't want it done that way. And so they couldn't even look at what was being productive versus not productive. And, I just remember many, many, many years later, I was in a different work environment, and I remember that the company actually approved of, these were the days of Walkmans, people bringing their own Walkman and headset to work, because if you're just doing your own quiet work, they recognize that people are more productive when they're listening to music or engaging in something other than just sitting there and being quiet.
And as you told that story about the first job where they wouldn't let you talk on the job, it became immediately obvious to me why they had a backlog. They had a
Good. I had not even thought of that.
They had the backlog because of that policy. That was possibly not the only reason, but I'm willing to bet that was like 90% of it. If they had that policy company-wide, it would be amazing if they got anything done. And I'll bet you they didn't get stuff done. I'll bet you that they were constantly dealing with backlogs. I'll bet you that they had trouble hitting deadlines. I'll bet you that they had trouble meeting order deadlines because it sounds like it was some sort of a manufactory. I'd be willing to bet that they were basically
radio
suffering
knobs
for that.
or something like that.
Yeah, well, I'm willing to bet that they were not only having a lot of trouble meeting deadlines. I would not be at all surprised if they were in financial trouble. And I would not be surprised if they went out of business very shortly after that, because when you and companies do this, it's less common than it used to be, because so many MBAs come out of school, haven't been exposed to, well, here's how you get people to be productive and motivated. But nevertheless, even today, you still find situations where companies put in policies that they just make you roll your eyes because you realize no one would want to do the work under those circumstances. It would be crazy. You'd have to be insane to have to want to do it that way. And yet, so many companies tend to do that kind of thing. So I'm convinced that company had their backlog because of that policy. And it illustrates the point beautifully. If you want to be productive, productivity does not lead to success. It does not lead to happiness. It's the other way around. You got to be happy in order to be productive. You got to feel good in order to be productive.
And in that situation, talking to my friends was I didn't think about it consciously, but I knew that I would feel good if I could have a conversation with somebody. I did know that would keep me awake and alert.
And by the way, you also touched on something there.
I was feeling kind of happy after I stopped being sleepy, and I'm like, oh, cool. And I knew I was working faster. One of the weird obscurities about me and my personality is when I do the same repetitive thing over and over, I love to see if I can best my own times. And I've always been that way. Mm-hmm. So I'll start going, okay, I was able to do 10 of these in 1 minute. Let's see, if I keep going, can I get to 11 or 12 per minute? Mm-hmm. And then when I'd reach that target, I'd go, okay, now can I get to 15? I will always best myself. That is just the nature of who I am. And to me, that's one of those situations. I was 16. They didn't need me as a full-time person, and I couldn't work full-time anyways. I was a student. But that's where it's like they really squandered a really great resource in me.
Oh, yeah.
Because crank the heck out of this process if they could have allowed me to have some fun and make it filled with ease and where it's like you're doing the work and you don't even realize you're working, and before you know it, the end of the day happens and look how productive you are.
Right. Exactly.
You know.
And by the way, you had also touched on something unwittingly, something that Shawn Achor mentions in his book, The Happiness Advantage, which is one of the best predictors of not only of happiness but of success is social connectivity. The more socially connected you are, the greater the likelihood you're going to succeed.
Wow.
And the reason for that is twofold. First, what you described in the work environment, where you have good social relationships in the work environment, it's going to improve productivity. But more than that, when there's adversity of some kind, either in the work environment or even outside of it, and it's affecting your work life, whatever, when there's any kind of adversity, maybe you even lost the job, maybe you're unemployed and you can't find another job. Well, your social network is what gets you through that. So on the one hand, your social network might actually help you get another job. On the other hand, if you have good social connections that you can rely upon, just by talking to those people and getting input from them, and even the commiserating and all that kind of thing, you get the energy you need in order to take the steps to get past this period of time, to get to the next good section. But if you don't have the social connectedness, what do you fall back on? That's what they found. They found if you have that social connectedness, it's much more likely you're going to succeed. If you don't have it, it's much more likely you're going to give up.
When I first started the job I'm in now, which that was a little over 10 years ago, they used to hire the people that do the Gallup polls they provided a survey. It was part of the Gallup polls, something that I guess they did in a corporate environment. And they apparently had been doing it for a number of years, but I only did it for, I think, my first 2 years, and then my company discontinued it. But it was a really fascinating survey. They asked a ton of questions. I mean, it took like 30, 40 minutes to complete the survey. And then when all the employees took it, then they aggregated the results and they fed them back to everybody and let us know where we stood as a company. And what they found was companies that, like me as an employee, if I have a best friend, if I've created a best friend in that company, my likeliness of being happy and staying in the job is higher than any other quality that they could possibly provide.
Yeah, I believe it.
I mean, there were things like, do they give you the tools necessary in order to do your jobs, or do you feel supported by your boss? Which those were like ranked in the top 5. But the number one thing where they felt like it really held people in their job was that their best friend was there.
Yeah.
That really supports the idea of social connection in a big way.
It does, yeah. In a way that Shawn didn't even anticipate, I don't think. But you're right. I can see how that would be true, because when you're working with somebody who you're really friends with, you can justify all kinds of abuses as long as you're getting to work with your friend and continue that relationship.
Right.
I can see that. I'm not saying that people should be abused, quite the opposite, but I can see how people would, even under the worst circumstances, they'd stick it out. I can see that.
Well, I've been at other companies where, if I was there a couple years and I decided, I wanted some professional growth, and so I left for something else, there were people at the job that I liked, that we were friendly coworkers. I enjoyed saying good morning to them every day. I liked to listen to their stories about their lives and their family. But when I left the company, I didn't have a best friend, or I didn't even, you say things like, oh, we'll keep in touch, and then you never do.
Yeah.
And I had kind of gotten to a certain point where I knew that when you say you'll keep in touch, that was just the kindness of what you say at that moment. Because what are you going to say? Gosh, you were a fun friend to have at work, but I'll never talk to you again.
Yeah, right.
Like nobody would actually say it, even if you're thinking it.
No.
But I know that where I am now, even though I have been discontented numerous times, or bored, or just, unchallenged, what has kept me there is I do have friends that I've made that regardless if I stay in this company or leave, they will be my friends forever. Because I have met the the kind of quality of friendship where even when we chit-chat about business, we'll end up with personal stuff, or, hey, let me tell you what's going on in my life, and they're my cheerleaders, and I'm their cheerleaders. And it's like I have a handful of friends that I know that I have made friends for life at that company.
Mm.
And they're the people that have definitely made it where when I was disgruntled and like, I can't stand this anymore, I was willing to reinvent myself and find new challenges because the idea of leaving them was a real hardship. It's like, I don't want to lose my daily connection with these people. I really, really like working with them. You know, they kind of
really
make
nice.
it worthwhile, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would agree that social connection piece is really, really important.
It is. By the way, for listeners who are enjoying the topic of the show today, productivity and happiness and the relationship between them, take a moment. Put it out on social media. We're trying to expand the number of people who know about the show so that they can decide for themselves whether it's something that they want to incorporate. And most people we're finding when they listen to the show, they want to keep listening. The numbers are expanding on that score in a large way. So please help bring this to more people. We want to give more and more people their daily dose of happy, and in the process, we expand our audience, and more people get to improve their daily dose of happy. They get to feel happier and become more productive as a result. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. So just take a moment, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, put out a message saying, "Hey, check out the show." End of commercial message.
And you couldn't have sent that more wonderfully.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
that. That's a great message.
Thank you. Well, you're an influence on me. I've been trying to use the Wendy method.
Well, you know, this would have been the kind of thing that when I was relinquishing talk radio, I would have loved to have had as an alternative. Because it would have, you know, if I'm going to get indoctrinated by listening to things or by having people in my life on a regular basis, I want to be indoctrinated by people who have something positive to say. They want to feel encouragement and inspiration and give me encouragement and inspiration. So I wish that this show was available to me all those number of years ago when I was going through the anti-talk radio time period.
Well, sure. I mean, I wish it for people today. That's one of the reasons that we do it, because it is necessary in any era, in any generation. It's necessary. You need this. And we talked earlier about how much negativity there is in the overall marketplace, in entertainment, in music, in news, in politics, and you name it. The negativity is everywhere. We got to have the antidote. We need it desperately. So, you know.
But I want to acknowledge you and your wife for starting this show, because I've had the thought many times, like, wouldn't it be great if I could help to influence people in a way that they could feel better each day? But you actually took the idea and moved it beyond an idea and put it into motion and did the work in order to take care of the technical stuff. And the time and energy that you've put into this, I know, is huge. And so I'm so appreciative for what you and your wife have pioneered so that I could come into it at this point and just do the part that I like without having to establish something new and figure out a platform and go through all the learning curve of the technical stuff. So, Walt, my hat's off to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. That feels really good to hear that, especially considering when you start this kind of thing off, you know you have 0 listeners, and you're talking to your microphone and to your wife, and that's about it. She's talking to you. That's it. That's the whole show right there. And you know it's going to be that way for a while.
Between you and your wife, you probably had heard all of each other's stories.
Yeah, well, of course, right. So we're saying, okay, let's see. Which ones have we not told so far? So, yeah.
But now you get to reap the benefits, because now we're at over 10,000 listens.
I know.
And I get to reap the benefits and be a part of that and go, woo-woo! You know, I came on, I don't know exactly where the listens were when, you know, we started, but I know that I'm a part of it, and that feels great.
Well, we've added approximately a quarter of that since you came on. So that gives you an idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went from about 7,500 to 10,000 plus?
I was looking at the numbers earlier, not today, yesterday. Yesterday morning. I started doing this counting when I installed some software that enabled me to do it in November 2016. Before that, I didn't have a clear way of counting actual plays. I could tell when somebody was visiting the website, but that doesn't necessarily mean a play. And so I have to kind of estimate. But what I do know is that between November and December, so for a 2-month period, November and December 2016, we had a grand total for the entire 2-month period of 94 plays. So I'm pretty sure for the first 4 years, other than what was happening on PRN now we get good plays over there. PRN gives us typically around 500 plays a week. So it's been very consistent over there. But in terms of what we had on our own website, it was minuscule. It was small. And it was only in the last, I want to say, 6-7 months, something like that we started to see this really big sweep upward that culminated in the last couple of months just being extraordinary. I mean, 10,000 plays. Of that 10,000, I would say probably about 60% of it has happened in the last 3 months.
Wow, that is really amazing.
Yeah, and it's still growing. It's still accelerating. That's why I don't think we're going to have any trouble reaching 1 million. In fact, I think sometime in 2018 we're going to hit the 1 million goal, and suddenly we're going to say, okay, so what's the next goal?
Now what? Exactly.
and I can tell you right now what I think that next goal is going to be. I think that next goal is going to be 1 million per month.
I think that'd be awesome. I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm totally on board with that.
So this is going to be a fun ride.
I truly believe there are so many people who are hungry for a positive message that we're sent. Now that we have multiple hosts and you're doing 11 shows a week, we have escalated the energy around what we're doing, that we're actually broadcasting through our vibrational energy so much bigger and bolder than when it was just you and one co-host and just once a week.
Right.
Now we're adding so much multiplication to it that literally our broadcast signal is getting brighter and bolder, and it's going out stronger, and I believe it's touching a lot of people, and they're connecting with us even now, because this is what they're looking for. They want to put their thoughts on positive. They want to tune their inner dial to an encouraging, inspiring message. I believe that's what many people have been desiring for a really long time.
I do.
So we're in the right
so.
place at the right time.
Yeah, I think so. And we're actually forging a new ground in this arena as well. This morning, of course, was my show with Joel. Joel's doing once a week now with me, which is great because he was my co-host for so long. And after the show, it was either before or after, I can't remember which, we were talking about the numbers, just like I was explaining to you what's been going on. And we were kind of speculating, kind of similar to what we're talking about here in terms of what the growth could be and so forth. And he and I took it in a different direction. We realized that, I mean, sure, I'm doing, with the help of you and 4 other co-hosts, I'm doing 11 shows a week. But once I've got this down so that not only I'm running a board, but that anybody can be running a board, because that's ultimately the goal, so that anyone can be doing this, we could be running shows constantly, 24 hours a day even, or at least 8 hours a day, continuous shows. And when you're doing that, now you're not only increasing the amount of positivity that's going out there, but you're also giving more and more audience members more and more reason to listen, because they know it's not just one dose a day. They can be getting dose after dose after dose. They can just, their entire day, they can be playing it in the background and just, getting all this positivity, juicing them along and increasing their productivity and helping them move ahead in their careers and improve their relationships and improve their health and all the different things that come along with it. I mean, this thing could explode. It could explode beyond imagination.
I know you can't physically see me, but my mouth has dropped open. My eyes have gotten huge. I'm like, what an awesome vision for this radio podcast. I love that. I totally love that. I can see how there are so many people who are in the position like I am, where I have a message, but I didn't have a platform where I could actually express that message. And that's what I love so much about you reaching out and meeting me, because you've given me a platform for expression that I've had a huge desire for a very long time. I know some people who I think, friends of mine, who would love to jump on board with, okay, teach me how to run the dashboard, and I'll jump on and do an hour.
Oh man, I would just love that. That'd be great. I mean,
Wow.
we're not quite at the point where I can do that because I'm still trying to make everything not only work well. Right now, we're getting good sound. We've had good sound for the last week, so I've got a large portion of it figured out. But now I've got to turn it into something that anybody can do, and that's going to take a little bit
Well,
longer to figure out. But we'll get there.
Walt, I know you will figure that out. And when you can teach it to me, I can teach it to anyone because my
That's
gift
right.
is the ability to articulate, the ability to. I can teach anything to anybody as long as I learn it.
You're a professional trainer, of course. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can see that.
So yeah, I mean, we've got the skills on board. So, oh, you just amped me up. I mean, that is like so exciting to me. So incredibly exciting to me.
So when I was saying earlier that we really want more and more people to share the message on social media, one of the reasons that we want to do that is as we share the message, as more and more people come on board, it makes it easier to get the resources we need in order to make it something that's more than 11 shows a week, to make it something that runs like 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and that's just continuously pouring out huge amounts of positivity that anyone can tap into anytime they want to. I mean,
or dare we say 24 hours a day?
24 hours a day. Who knows? That could happen, potentially.
I mean, I've got some international connections in the personal development area, and I know my friends have even more connection than I do internationally.
I see every possibility for that to happen. And as that happens, basically you're talking about a global phenomenon going on. So not only are you helping to help push the project along because you need that synergy, you need the growth of the listenership while you're working on growing the operation and vice versa. You need the two to go along side by side, but you're also fueling what could ultimately become a phenomenon that rivaled, like, The Secret, in terms of how big it can become. This could
Let's
just be
do it.
incredible.
But you know what? I don't want to be a secret.
No, we won't be a secret. Although I will tell you a story. This has really nothing to do with productivity, but I love this because it's a great marketing story. It shows what happens when you can do something in a really creative way. And I'm not at all suggesting this for the show, but I thought it's a great little story. There was a restaurant that opened in New York a few years back. And anyone who knows anything about New York City knows that whenever a new restaurant opens, the restaurateur is hoping that they become the talk of the town. They become the new in place to eat at, right? Because that's how, in the city of millions of people, that's how you can actually survive. You need that kind of word of mouth, and if you get it, then you thrive. Well, this one restaurateur had a really, really unique idea. He put his restaurant behind, what was it? I think it was a bar, actually. I think it was a bar. He put it behind the bar, meaning that it was in a room on the other side of the wall, the inside wall from the bar. And there was no access point from outside. The only way you could get to the restaurant would be to know that it was there, go through the bar, go to a door, knock on the door like it was prohibition, and get allowed into the restaurant. So basically, he made it as impossible to get to as you can imagine. And the idea was everybody who came into it was supposed to keep it a secret. Well, you can just imagine what happens with a secret like that.
Well, if the food is great and the environment is fun,
which it was,
oh yeah, that secret won't be a secret for long.
That place packed within a month. Absolutely packed. A place that had no signage, no outside door. There was no way to get to it directly from the outside. You had to pass through the bar.
Wow.
And it became the in place in New York City. So it just goes to show, even if you hide it away, it can still be a phenomenon.
Well, as long as you have something great of value to offer, exclusivity is one of the highest rated marketing tools that there is.
Yeah.
And that's what you just said about that restaurant. There was exclusivity because only so many people could be there, and there was no signage, so you had to know somebody who knew somebody that even told you that existed.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
It was a 100% word-of-mouth, market-driven enterprise.
Wow. Well, when I was in the costume business and my partner and I had this costume manufacturing company, we were called the Creative Alliance. And because we had a vision for working with many different people of many different talents, which we did, and it was really fun. So we felt like we were the Creative Alliance. But our tagline was the best kept secret in Texas. And I didn't know Law of Attraction then like I do today. And I got to tell you, even though every product we turned out was exquisite, and we got tons of accolades, and our customers were so grateful and loved our product, we remained a well-kept secret. Very few people knew about us. I mean, costuming in a big way is not obviously competitive with a restaurant where people have to eat every day.
Right. It's a very much of a niche market.
So trying to market us was, I did the best I knew to do at the time while still working within the business. But I realized when we closed the doors, wow, once I understood Law of Attraction, I'm like, we kept talking about being the best kept secret. And I even remember talking to like potential new clients, and I would say, well, we're the best kept secret. It's like people don't know about us. And I kept talking about how people don't know about us in the attempt to say, but I'm telling you, so please hire us.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh, if I knew then what I know now, we would have blown the doors off of places, and we would have had more business than we possibly knew what to do with.
That's how it is in life. We learn. And I've been very grateful to learn about the Law of Attraction. It's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast. And it's one of the reasons I decided to do it even though we had 0 listeners when we started, because I just loved the fact that it gave me information I had never really had from any other source. I had been exposed to like the Tony Robbins of the world and the other predecessors of the New Thought movement, as it's called. But none of them had really touched my soul in the same way. None of them had really touched me deep down. This is the first thing that touched me deep down. And it surprised me because you've always described yourself as a planner. I was a methodical, logical person. I was very logical. And if you couldn't explain it with logic, then I wasn't interested. And when you first get exposed to this is almost like magic, this Law of Attraction stuff. So it was a big shift for me. And sometimes still is, to be perfectly honest. But I got so much out of it that it didn't matter. And so I feel very much the same kind of appreciation for my exposure to the Law of Attraction as what you're describing. It's the same feeling. And it's a feeling of possibility. It's a feeling of what's going to come next. I can hardly wait.
Well, and I think I had told you before offline that nothing excites me more and ignites the fire inside of me like talking about possibilities of what can be created. So, in a way, and I've never really thought about it until now in this way. No wonder Law of Attraction is something that is so appealing to me, because within the Law of Attraction, there is an element of everything is possible. All you have to do is think it and believe it, and you can create it. And it's like, wow, that's the kind of blow the lid off of, everything that I can possibly imagine. Because I kind of grew up in a way where I believed anything was possible, but the messages around me squelched that to the point that I'd have a grandiose idea, but I called it grandiose, and that became an ugly word.
Yeah.
Grandiose, in my definition, was like, yeah, you had a big idea, but it can never happen. It's not even possible. So I'd love to talk about, and it's funny because the word dreaming is not really my thing. Like people say you can dream anything, Dream was not my word, and it doesn't mean it doesn't apply. It just wasn't my particular word. But I love the word possibility. What is possible? And there's so much possible.
Well, the topic
and
today...
I know that, Go ahead.
The topic today has been productivity, and I want to tie back to it because there really is a tie back with what we're talking here. And the tie back is, first of all, once again, I appreciate you with your appreciation for me for starting the podcast. But when you start a podcast like this, and when you start pursuing something with nothing, and you're working with absolutely nothing, you've got no listenership, even the equipment doesn't work properly, and it's an ongoing thing like that. When you're working with that, and you keep going anyway, it's because your productivity is being driven by your enthusiasm, by your dream, by your excitement level, which pretty much proves Shawn Achor's point. It's the happiness that comes first. It's not the success that comes first. And that has been pretty much what drove me all along, even when I was just sustaining it with just a once a week thing. And when it got to the point where I was starting to see the improvement in listenership, I mean, I didn't have to think twice. It's not like somebody had to hire me, okay, go to work now and start building this thing. It was more like, to my wife, you think I can take some time to work on this thing that isn't producing any income for us because I'm loving it so much? My productivity's been incredible as a result of that. And all because it's based on how enthusiastic I feel about it, how happy I am doing this thing. So to me, that's like the ultimate proof that productivity is driven by happiness and not the other way around.
You know, I didn't know that about you. I mean, I knew little bits and pieces of how you started it, but hearing you put that together in that last couple paragraphs just gives me such a sense of awe and even greater appreciation, because you did something just for the joy of it.
Yes.
Not for the income stream, but for the joy. That is just so amazing to me.
In fact, I have to admit, when I first started, the only way I could get myself to do it was to resign myself to what I thought was the fact that I could never earn a living doing this. So the only thing left was to do it because I enjoyed it. And I did enjoy it. I loved it from the very beginning. I mean, and I think I've told you, I was always a very introverted person. So for me to find a way to actually not be introverted, to be somewhat extroverted, to have conversations, to not be afraid of diving into stuff and so forth, what I don't know what the word is for that. It's an awakening, I think. It's an awakening to, wow, this is a whole new way of living for me. You're amazed that I did it. I'm amazed. I would have been amazed if I didn't do it. That's how it felt to me.
Cool.
I would have been amazed if I didn't do it, because this is so much fun. It's so enjoyable. I can hardly wait to get us to the next stage, and you know, with the help of you guys, I know we're going to get there. But oh yeah, that's what drove me. So how did I do it on Joy? I did it because that was the only thing that was available.
And I really believe another next level for us is when we have a continuation of one caller after another.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
Wanting to, you know, just add to the conversation, add to the thoughts. You know, and the cool thing is, somebody can call it, and I'm saying this to some listeners right now that are probably going to listen up to one of our replays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you call in, you don't have to feel like you have to have something profound to say.
No, that's true.
Because what I know is, when another person is thrown into the mix, you have a different energetic vibration, and that will cause the three of us together to actually spin something different that that you and I, Walt, alone may have never thought to even conceive.
This is true.
So it's like, I love I know this, and it's like I'm not begging anybody, but it's like I know that listeners are in the process of starting to come into our show so that we have more engagement that's more live, which that in itself will cause a greater influx and stirring of the energy. That's going to be part of us building an audienceship of over 1 million listens in the next year.
That's definitely going to happen, no doubt about it. And by the way, to those who are new listeners, I want to remind you too, subscribe. Subscribing is how you find out when the next episodes have come out. Because it comes right to your smartphone. So first of all, you can just subscribe by going to loatoday.net. There's buttons right there where you can subscribe. On your iPhone, you can go to the iTunes store, or you can just go to your podcast software built into your iPhone, either one, and search on LOA Today. You'll find us there. If you have an Android phone, similar idea, just go to Google Play and search on LOA Today, and you'll find us. And Wendy, if somebody's looking for a little private coaching, you're good at that. How can they reach you?
They can find me at my website, which is wendydillard.com.
And I'm looking forward to finding you tomorrow, because we get to continue the conversation once again.
I will be here.
I will too. We hope you're all here too as well, here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.